Hi, welcome back to the XII Sound channel and part 41 in the series all about my Project 12 DIY modular analog synth. The module this time round is an update of my Little Box's Avalanche 3 drone. That's the Avalanche 3 drone. So of course it's an update of Avalanche 3. I'm calling it Avalanche 3.2. So this is the Avalanche 3.2 drone module for Project 12. Now if we look at the original Little Boxes, what we have here, you can see there's the 3 oscillators, each with their own frequency control, and also each one has a CV input. I had a passive filter on there, which to be honest never really did that much, and then there was a volume control, and then they were all passively mixed to an output. Well, for the Project 12 version, I'm sticking with 3 Avalanche oscillators. More about what that is in a moment, but I've taken some inspiration from some other examples of Avalanche oscillators, one of which is the Look Mum No Computer Circle of Doom drone, I think it's called. I'll put a link down in the description so you can go and have a look at what that is. But the key things that I've taken from that, I've still got the 3 oscillators in the same way that I had them in the Little Box. It's also, in the Little Box, 2 of them were a kind of a low to mid frequency range, and one of them was a higher frequency range. So I've kept that arrangement as well. But on the Circle of Doom drone, what he did there was he made each of the oscillators able to be individually switched in or out. So I've incorporated switches for each of the individual oscillators, but I've lost the individual CV inputs on each of the oscillators. Another idea from the Circle of Doom was that there is a master voltage control, which essentially is a master frequency control, which is simply it's a control pot on the power supply to the oscillators. So I've incorporated that as well, so you can set up the drone and then you can sweep the frequency of all 3 at the same time. But what I've done, this is where I've brought back in the CV control. So the CV control now is on that master control. So when you apply a CV, a control voltage, you affect all 3 oscillators all at the same time via that master control. Okay, so that's the basic updates to Avalanche 3 to give me Avalanche 3.2. So let's have a look at what all that looks like when you put it on a circuit diagram. So this is the diagram, and there's 3 oscillator circuits. So if we look at one of those, the thing about it is it uses an S9018 transistor. The reason it's like this transistor is because it will oscillate, self-oscillate via an avalanche breakdown at reasonably low voltages. Not all of them do. But in order to get them to do this, you have to remove the middle leg of the transistor. It sounds a bit brutal, but you simply snip it off. That's the base of the transistor, if you want to know what it actually is. So we remove the transistor base, and we just connect up the collector and the emitter as shown in the circuit diagram here. And then to set the frequency, you just select a value for the capacitor, which basically alters the discharge rate, which alters the frequency. So I've got 2 of them with the same capacitor to give me a low to mid range, and one of them with a smaller capacitor to give me a higher range, because it takes less time to charge up and discharge, so it switches at a higher frequency. That's just very basics of how it works. And then, as per the Little Boxes version, they're all passively mixed together to give a single output. we go back to the other side of the diagram there, there's the master control on the input there, which is simply a resistor and a potentiometer on the voltage supply. But then I've added a Vactrol across the two tabs of that potentiometer, and that's now where the CV input is injected in there. So that's the circuit diagram. Incidentally, all the diagrams and things will be in the Dropbox folder, and there'll be a link down in description for that. So I did a strip board layout so I could build that, and the strip board layout looks like this. Not too complicated. There's just mostly a repetition on there. And I put it together and tested it. So this is before I mounted it all on panels and things. And yeah, it worked fine. I got a drone output and I was able to switch things in and out, and even the CV control worked with the master control. But one issue was that the overall output was actually quite low. So here comes my next modification inspiration, and this time it came from Christian Blausel's Modular in a Week series. Again, link below. And he did a reverse avalanche oscillator, just a single oscillator. And the way he got around the low output was to use a fixed gain amplifier on the output. So I've borrowed his design for a fixed gain amplifier, and also buffered it as well, because I've used a TL072. So I've got, it's a dual op amp, so I use one half for the amplification and the other half for buffering the output. And the circuit diagram for that looks like this. Now, the thing to know is for the oscillators, it's a single rail supply, so it's plus 12 volt ground. For this amplifier, I've used a dual rail, so it's minus 12 ground and plus 12, which gives me more headroom for the amplitude of the output on the amplifier. So yeah, it gives a good output. There is no control on the gain, so you can't adjust the gain. It is just a fixed gain, and that's all fixed by the resistors. So yep, that's the circuit diagram for that. So what I did, I built it as a separate piggyback board. So the strip board layout for it looks like this. Very, very simple, not very many components. And then when you stack it all up and put it on a panel, the finished item looks like this from behind. So there you can see the stacked circuit boards all mounted up. And if we turn the panel round, then the control side of it looks like this. So there you've got the 3 frequency pots. There's 3 LEDs. You don't have to put the LEDs on the front, but who doesn't like lights on their panels? And then the 3 switches at the side, so you can switch each one in and out independently. Below that, you've got the master control, which will affect the frequency of all 3 at the same time. Then you've got the CV input and the output, which is coming from the buffered amp. So it sounds complicated, but it's just lots of repetition really, and it is fairly straightforward, not too difficult. But what does it sound like? Okay, let's go over to the synth and we'll crank it up and we'll have a listen to what the output sounds like. Here we have Avalanche 3.2. I'm not doing anything fancy with the patching on this. This is just the output that's going to mixer. This is an input. It's coming from a 4-step sequencer that's actually not running at the moment. That's so I can demonstrate the CV input control later on. But for now, we're just going to have a listen to the drone itself. So we've got the 3 oscillators there. They're all, even though the lights are on, none of them are switched on. These are the switches here. So we'll switch the bottom one on. So that's what reverse avalanche oscillator sounds like. I'm going to switch in, and it's one of the lower frequency range ones. The next one. Now we're starting to sound a little bit more like a drone. Those interference patterns. And then the higher frequency one. And as I said before, they're all independently controllable. Or we can use the master control. And of course you can switch them in and out if you want. But what about CV control? Right, let's set the sequencer running and see what happens. So you can hear that it's affecting all three at the same time. We can try a little bit of ambience effect. Starting to get almost a bit spooky there. Talking of which, if you're into your spookiness, I've got something coming up in the Little Boxes series, which is going to be nicely in time for Halloween. But if you want to find out what that is, then you'll have to check back, or better still, subscribe, and then you'll get a notification. But we're starting to get towards the spooky season with this little module. Well, there you go. Update of Avalanche 3 Little Boxes into Avalanche 3.2 Project 12 module. So if you fancy building your own Avalanche drone module, I've given you circuit diagrams, I've given you strip board layouts, I've given you links to get everything that you need to look at, and so why not? Go on, have a go, build your own.